From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
I'm Gurpreet Kambo with your news and sports updates to 12 o'clock. The BC Coroner Service announced this morning that 169 people died in August of 2022 due to the toxic drug supply. That's about 5.5 deaths per day. The number of deaths in August represents a 12% decrease from July when 193 people died. This brings the total number of lives lost this year to 1,468. Illicit drug toxicity is the leading cause of unnatural death in British Columbia. Sheila Malcolmson, Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, said in a statement that these are, quote, devastating losses for family, friends, communities, and loved ones. Maxwell Johnson, the Indigenous man who was arrested alongside his granddaughter in a Bank of Montreal in 2019, he settled his human rights case against the Vancouver police. The BC Police Complaint Commissioner determined in June that a public hearing was not needed into the arrest of Johnson and his granddaughter. He then filed a human rights complaint against the police board alleging racial profiling, wrongful detention, and handcuffing. He announced at a press conference this morning that Vancouver police will pay an undisclosed amount to Johnson's family for, quote, injury to dignity. Gas prices are set to hit a record high tomorrow. They are already past $2.30 per liter at some stations. According to experts, it's because of a situation in which several refineries in Washington and in Alberta have gone offline at the same time. Gas Wizard, an online price tracker, predicted the price could hit $2.33 per liter on Thursday, making it the most expensive gas in Canada. And more on gas prices. So record-breaking prices in BC are putting food bank delivery services at risk of losing volunteers. Ryan Bailey has more.
The Fraser Valley Regional Food Bank's Mobile Meals Program delivers roughly 200 hot meals each night between Monday and Thursday to seniors and at-risk people in the community. Director of Programs Lindsay Rempel says gas prices are forcing some volunteers out of action.
There have been a certain amount of volunteers that have told us that they've had to either step back completely or reduce the amount of times that they're coming to volunteer a week.
Rempel says these meals are crucial for people who are already struggling to keep up with other living expenses and often don't have caretakers. For 1680 The Crow, I'm Ryan Bailey.
And to tell us a little more about this story, Ryan Bailey joins us on the line right now. So, Ryan, what happens to these meals if there aren't enough volunteers?
Gurpreet, unfortunately, if there's not enough people to deliver, not everyone can receive their meals. It takes 12 volunteers to cover 12 different routes each night.
What about the delivery system makes this so important?
Most of the people receiving the meals have health complications that restrict them from leaving their homes or make it difficult for them to provide for themselves. Many of them are seniors who do not have access to assisted living. Gurpreet?
Thank you, Ryan. David Eby released his housing platform this morning. It represents a substantial shift in BC's housing policy. So it includes several new items, including a new anti-flipping tax on the resale of residential properties within 2 years. It also includes an item that allows single-family homes across BC's urban areas to be redeveloped with high-density buildings up to 3 units. It makes secondary suites legal across BC in every region, which would override municipal law. And it includes a number of other things that are a shift from current and historical policy in BC. Vancouver police are warning online buyers and sellers after a string of robberies that took place linked to Facebook Marketplace. One of the robberies occurred at gunpoint. 2 of them were in the Champlain Heights neighborhood in southeast Vancouver, and one of them was in Kerrisdale. According to Steve Addison of Vancouver Police, the victims, quote, did everything right. They arranged a meeting in a public location and still fell victim. Police are investigating the incident, but in the meantime are urging buyers and sellers to use caution. They also suggested that residents can use the police headquarters on Canby Street to make the exchange. Some serious allegations have emerged against Vancouver Canucks owner Francesco Aquilini. The 53-year-old businessman was accused of child abuse, both physical and mental, and those accusations are coming directly from his ex-wife Talia Aquilini as well as his 3 children. Aquilini has denied all the allegations. The NHL released a statement saying that it is monitoring the situation. As of today, the import of commercial dogs will be prohibited. Reporter Seamus Page has more.
The federal government is banning the entry of commercial dogs due to concerns about rabies. Right now, Canada does not have a problem with rabies-infected dogs, but they are blocking the import of commercial dogs from 100 countries that they believe to be a high risk for dog rabies. This includes countries like mainland China, Ukraine, Russia, Brazil, India, and many others that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency believe to be a high risk. All permits issued on or after June 28th of this year have already expired. This will restrict the entry of dogs for the purpose of adoption, fostering, breeding, show, or other purposes. Seamus Page, 1680, The Crow.
In Quebec election news, CIQ party leader François Legault says incumbent immigration minister Jean Boulet is no longer qualified to hold that job. Legault made the comments today after Boulet said the majority of immigrants in the province end up in Montreal, don't work, speak French, or hold Quebec values during a local debate last week. Legault was forced to confront those comments today and says despite Boulet's apology, he would no longer be immigration minister if the CIQ wins the October 3rd election.
It's an error, an important error. I regret that. And I think that Mr. Boulet regrets that, and it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. I think that in the fire of the exchanges, he said something that it's not true. It's not true what he said, and he understands that it's not true.
Hurricane Ian is approaching landfall on Florida's southwest coast. The Category 4 hurricane is bringing heavy rains and winds. Deanne Criswell with the Federal Emergency Management Agency says everyone must take the hurricane seriously.
Hurricane Ian is and will continue to be a very dangerous and life-threatening storm. And this is going to be for the days ahead.
A U.S. federal agency is updating its definition of the word healthy.
The Food and Drug Administration reports more than 80% of Americans aren't eating enough vegetables, fruit, and dairy. Now the agency is trying to change that with a new definition of the word healthy. The FDA says food packaging labeled as healthy should adhere to limits of certain nutrients like saturated fat, sodium, or added sugars. Nutrient-dense foods like salmon or nuts could now be considered healthy when they weren't before, even though they're higher in fat. The FDA is also pushing for nutrition labels to go on the front of packages instead of the back. Elizabeth Schulze, ABC News, Washington.
In sports news, today marks the 50-year anniversary of Paul Henderson's dramatic goal for Canada in Game 8 that clinched the Summit Series against the Soviet Union. Henderson says the team felt grounded after they exited the ice in Moscow.
There was no jumping around in the room. It was very, we're looking across the room and smiling, sitting there, and I think we had a couple of beers, and it was just that, oh my gracious, we've done it.
And New York Yankees player Aaron Judge is still one home run away from tying Roger Maris's American League record of 61 home runs in a season. He could hit the mark tonight in Toronto as New York closes out a 3-game series at Rogers Centre. Ben Wagner calls Blue Jays games on Sportsnet 590 The Fan.
I think about what the moment needs to have recognized. That's what I'm thinking about. Is there a script? No chance. I learned very early in my career that you just cannot go in with a script because you just never know how the home run is going to project.
The Canucks are about to hit their second practice today at 12:30, their last one before their preseason game against the Seattle Kraken tomorrow evening. And the New York Mets lost in a baseball game 6-4 to the Miami Marlins. This puts them both in a tie in the NL East division. Marlins manager Don Mattingly says his team is doing its best to win against teams battling first place.
For us, obviously in our situation, we want our guys to play hard. And, out of respect to everyone in the game, really, the other, out of respect to Atlanta, it's up to us to go out and play hard and give our best effort. And so that part feels good.
And in your weather news, so cloudy with showers today, light rain this afternoon with a high of 14 degrees. In the evening, it'll be partly cloudy with fog patches overnight and a high of 13 degrees. That was your news to 12 o'clock. Gurpreet Kamba, 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. Hello, welcome. I'm joined by Jen. I'm joined by Kathy as well, two female fire captains from New Westminster and Burnaby. Slip of the tongue. Sorry. Joined by Kathy and Jen. Jen from Vancouver, Kathy from New Westminster. You guys are both fire captains. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm. So I like to start, timeline-wise. You guys mentioned training under Fire Chief Howard, we were just talking about before we started recording here. What can you tell me about your guys' training days back in, was it 97 you mentioned?
Yeah, so Jennifer here. I started with Maple Ridge Fire Department in 1997 as a volunteer. In fact, I was a strict volunteer back then. It wasn't even a paid-on-call position. And we were earlier, before the podcast started, we were talking about Chief Howard Exner, who was one of the training officers for my recruit class. But both Kathy and I know him through his work through the Justice Institute of BC, which is the predominant training facility for all fire services in the province.
And Jen, you do training. I was going to ask you, were there any female trainers when you guys were first starting out?
No, there were no female instructors at all back when we both started. And in fact, both Kathy and I, we met through work at the Justice Institute I started there in 98. And we were technicians, so we assisted organizing the props, lighting the fires, filling bottles and doing those kinds of things to support the instructors. But it wasn't until 2016 that I transferred over to become an instructor in the Fire Academy.
So a similar experience for me, and Kathy here speaking. I began my career as a paid-on-call in Coquitlam, and I was part of a class of 8 recruits that were trained by the training division in Coquitlam. And at the time, I was hired at the Justice Institute in the Fire Safety Division as a technician, where, again, to echo what Jen was saying, was to support instructors in the programs that were running on site at the time. There were no training leads that were female at the time. And for me, the transition came in 2005, where I transitioned from being a technician to being an instructor, or recognized as an instructor at the JI. And currently in my role, I'm a senior training captain, in addition to being a fire suppression captain.
So Jen, do you notice, so back then compared to now, when you do your training now, did you notice a big discrepancy in the male and female gender gap between who's actually training to become firefighters?
Oh, absolutely. So in our early years, Kathy and I were we were definitely anomalies, the unicorn in the room. So there were very, very few women. In fact, I was the first female in Maple Ridge, and Kathy was the first hired female in New West. I was one of the first, maybe the third or fourth in Vancouver. So there were very, very few women pursuing that. And when you look at the process now, and you see the young women at the fire school, the class, it's incredible to see a class of 20 with 6 women out of the 20 in the group as women now. That was even, I would safely say that even 5 years ago, that was unheard of.
Yes. I mean, when we went through our training in the Fire School Academy, if you had one female in every other or third class that was run there, was kind of like what you would see, a rarity. Now, even in our recruit classes that we're hiring, we're seeing a change where the percentages of women to men are better than they've ever been. Are they great? Not quite yet. We still have a fair amount of work to do. We definitely, I think the overall sentiment is to get it so that it's a better representation of what we have in our communities in terms of peoples of all avenues. So I think the move is there for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And how could you describe your relationship with your male peers in these, early training days?
I would say that I was, my classmates, my cohorts, like super supported for the most part. There were definite challenges outside of that, but you get hired with a group and they're all on the same page as you. We're all aspiring. We're all trying to get through the fire school, or we're all, in our recruit class where we're hired together. And so there's a certain level of camaraderie, because you wouldn't have gotten that far if you weren't that kind of a person. The challenges that I personally faced were after my recruit class, once I was in the fire halls. So
from my perspective, I think that walking into being the first female in U.S. and getting hired was in itself a challenge, but it wasn't so much because of my firefighting skills per se, because I was very comfortable and solid with my skills. From my perspective, the biggest challenge was knowing the impact that I was having on, and arguably and fairly on the men, because they were all men, working in their environment that they formerly had, because there's no disputing that it changes the environment once you bring in different groups of people that they're not accustomed to working with. So it was finding my way through that to make it so that it was easier both for the men, but also for me to assimilate and work well with them.
Okay, yeah, and do you feel like once you mentioned, like, do you agree the same way? Like, once you were in the training camp, there was a sense of camaraderie. Everybody's grinding like through this course. Do you feel the same way as Jennifer there?
Well, it's interesting. We're a much smaller department than Vancouver, and Vancouver tends to hire large groups in one go. There were 3 of us that were hired, and US being smaller. So yes, there's an immediate bond. All 3 of you, and in my case, the 3 of us, were hired under the same premise, under the same exacting demands. And so there's a bond that's made that's really quick in the process once you first start. There were enough people that had been hired just before us that became part of the bond as well, because we were all, new.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps to kind of keep us in check, but also, elevated us through that whole early stages of our career.
Yeah. Did you guys feel like you had to prove yourselves once you were going in? Like, you had to prove yourselves that, like, did you feel that there was an expectation that you had to be tougher because you were a woman?
Oh, yeah. There is the saying that a female needs to be 10 times as good as her male colleague standing next to her just to be seen as an equal. And some varying degree of that. But, we definitely... there definitely is a little bit of that.
Well, there is, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that, you had to work twice, 3 times as hard as the next person to get the same equal recognition factor. Arguably, things have gotten better in the intervening years since we've started. I've noticed that, especially with the latest groups of recruits that we've hired. Something that just hopped into my mind is the term double bind, and something that I had just recently heard. And the double bind is an interesting one here, especially as we progressed in our careers, especially now that we're leaders, because the perception that a male who's very assertive, straightforward, and gives, because in our world, orders is what runs,
Chain of
emergent,
command,
emergent incidents.
Rigid structures.
Exactly. So there is a perception, not among everyone, but among certain people, that if a male is very authoritative, assertive, takes control, he's considered to be very good and good as a leader. Whereas the perception now can twist a little bit with women in that because societal norms have us as maternal, caring individuals in society. But now in a role, especially in a commanding role, as we say in our service, that can flip the script a little bit with women as opposed to men.
Yeah, there's a well-known study, the Heidi and Harold study, that speaks to this exact concept where Harvard University, I believe it was, don't quote me on that, but one of the universities did a study with a bunch of students where they were looking at different leaders and their resumes, and they labeled one of them Heidi and one of them Harold, and everything about that resume, everything about that person was this exact same thing except for the name. And the students believed the male was somebody that they would want to work for, and the female was somebody they wouldn't want to work for. They felt that she was a bitch or bossy or all of those things, like that Kathy had alluded to. So that kind of weird double bind. So it
Or that exact same, when they're looking at, like, oh, I take initiative and whatnot, and my name is Harold, they view that as a good thing, but you're saying,
Heidi
is stuck up or whatever other words you would use for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that, so you guys are both captains, do you find that, sometimes your authority doesn't come across as strong as some of like the other male captains or male chiefs?
I don't know that I feel that, to be quite honest. I don't. I think that's a societal thing more so than, because, we actually do know our individual people that we're working with, our crews, the young people that are with us. What I do find interesting sometimes is civilians, that when you get off the rig and the civilian, if there's a guy that is standing next to me, if he's got salt and pepper hair, they might just naturally be drawn to him, and then he'll have to say, go talk to her, she's the boss, right? So it's just it's a weird predicament, but I don't feel like that is the case in the fire company itself.
No, and that's very true. Like within my crew or crews that I manage and lead, I do not get that sense at all. It's more generalized is what I'm trying to convey here. And when, and the case example you used is something that happens to me too. I think it happens to every female captain that I've ever spoken to, where you show up and you got your command board and you're making decisions, and they'll go straight to the driver who happens to be on the other side of the truck. So yeah, I think that as time goes on, as more of us become, accustomed to seeing women in roles like ours, that will subside to some extent over time.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few women hired in our era when Kathy and I started, and then there was a bit of a lull for most organizations. So here we are in our positions, our leadership positions as officers, but it's going to be a big gap before there are more women in leadership roles. Kathy's the only captain at this, in the trucks in New West, and there's only 2 of us in Vancouver that are sitting in the front seat. So like Kathy spoke to, again, it's going to take some time before society kind of gets used to that as well. And I think that in terms of more women joining the fire service, I think a big part of it is you can't be what you can't see. That's one of our, mottos that we've used through Camp Ignite over the years. But I think that the more women see other women in those positions, the more they imagine themselves in those positions. So whether it is in a leadership position or whether it's even simply just pursuing the fire service in general.
Yeah, definitely. What I'm seeing too, combined with that while I'm thinking about it, is the shift among our newer, more junior members. That whole piece about having to work 3 times harder, 4 times harder than your male counterpart to prove yourself is lessened, in my view, in the last few years. I mean, I know, I see it, I hear it from the male colleagues and junior male colleagues, that there's a sense of, we don't care what you look like, where you come from, what background you have, as long as you can do the job.
Yeah.
And that's a prevailing sense that I'm getting within my workplace anyway.
Yeah, I do agree with what Kathy is saying in that, like, but again, we're talking, we were from over 2 decades ago. Yes. Was when we were pursuing this. And so things have changed, society has changed as a whole. So it would make sense that, people are coming into this career with a more diverse background, whether or not you're a female or a male. So I think that the playing field's a little bit leveled in that sense. So everybody is, and younger people seem to have a different kind of respect for each other, I think, than maybe. I think there's just a lot of different complex things that are happening in the world to present a different opportunity to look at things than what we had when we were younger.
I think the worldview lens of our newer hires is wider than the folks that we first initially started working with, because back then
we didn't have cell phones.
No, we didn't have cell phones.
Oh my God.
We're dating ourselves right now. What? A cell phone. Because and entering into it, the men that were already established within the service were single career minded, single profession minded. Many didn't actually have nearly as much education as many people are walking into the fire service now, so that also changes your worldview.
Yeah.
And how you would approach.
Oh, absolutely.
A new employment circumstance or, change in life.
Yeah. Jen, what do you think, this one specifically for you because you handle a lot of training, what do you think are some of the positive steps that, people like you in your position can make towards inspiring younger female firefighters? I understand that there's more. What do you think, there's more than ever? What do you think are some of the positive steps that need to be taken or are currently being taken?
Well, I would say, things like what we've done with Camp Ignite, inspiring people young to, let them know they can do whatever they want, whether they choose firefighting or not, absolutely is important. I think that just making ourselves available to assist younger firefighters, and that goes without saying that it's our male or female young firefighters. If anybody comes to me with any kind of question or, I'm happy to support them as best I can. And I don't know that we necessarily had that same kind of support when we were younger. Just the dynamics of the culture were a little bit different. So
I think too, it's removing the mystery of it all to the best that we can, and making it known about the career and more education around what is actually entailed in taking on a career as a firefighter. And like I said, removing the mystery or demystifying the Hollywood factor. Mm-hmm. That comes with our career. And I think that the more is made visible out there, whether through a program like Camp Ignite, social media, websites like FSWBC, which is doing a tremendous job at bringing awareness, is only going to help things long term at like I said, demystifying the career or the possibility of a career.
I think absolutely what you said earlier, Jen, like what you can't be, what you can't see. That's why I think a Facebook page like FSWBC is like so important, because I completely agree with you. If you can't see female firefighters, why would a female ever want to be a firefighter, right? Totally.
It's simply you do something you don't think about. It's not that when I was younger, it's not that I ever thought that I couldn't do it. For me,
oh no,
I honestly, it had never actually occurred to me until somebody suggested it. Somebody suggested it as an opportunity for me, and I thought, oh, interesting. And then I was, I looked into it, and
Oh,
here I am.
interesting. That's such a different experience than I had. I come from a firefighting family. And I used to hang around my dad's fire hall at lunchtime in between school classes. And I'd say, I want to do this. I want to do this line of work. I want to become a firefighter. And it was like laughed at. I mean, you have to go back many years for that. But when it started to become real, then I aligned myself with my education and all the other aspects to pursue it. It never occurred to me that I would not be able to do this work in any way. I mean, that was my grounder.
Yeah. And in terms of some of the younger, kind of circling back to your question there, I think one of the things that we are aspiring to do through Fire Service Women BC is provide opportunities for women to get together and train together, to give them that confidence. So when they're working in another group of women, they can get good at whatever that skill might be, as opposed to trying to have the confidence to even participate in a male only or in a male predominant training session. So I think that will make a difference for some of the younger women. And again, it's, there's varying degrees amongst different fire services throughout the province and, well, really throughout the world. But some departments are very progressive and are very supportive of people in general. And there are most definitely departments out there that may be sitting a little bit in the dark ages. Yet that one woman might be in that organization and really feel challenged. Her confidence might really feel challenged. So I think that's one of the things that we can do to support other women. And we just don't know. We don't know what your situation is in your workplace. Sometimes we keep some of these things very close to ourselves and don't share some of our, less than stellar experiences. But we just don't know what.
It can definitely be like a case by case, and I'm sure it goes by district by district, like you said. Some can be more progressive, some can be in the dark ages. Maybe it's a 100% male fire hall for 10 years, and what does that look like, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I work in what is currently quite a progressive fire department. So and with being afforded the opportunity to be a senior training captain, it has, I'd like to believe, made a big difference in our approaches in that way. So for that, I'm really grateful to have been given the opportunity that I've had to be where I'm at. But the support mechanism is an important one. Just like men will support each other, men will also support us. But women, it's ultimately very important, while we're still such a small minority overall, to support each other. And there's definitely differences. I mean, we'd be naive to say, yeah, we're the same. We're the same as the men. Well, we're not. Mm-hmm. We're women and they're men, and there are very specific things that are applicable to us. And it's knowing that you have that sisterly support, understanding, oh yeah, that's a challenge that we go through that men don't necessarily go through. Yeah. And how do you cope with it? And so it's all these coping mechanisms that we found out on our own, Jen and I and our sisters of our same era, that now we can share. Yeah. As we picked our way through the best and not so best ways of handling it.
And, we were fortunate, like Kathy and I have known each other, like we said, since our, baby firefighter days. And so, we were fortunate that we could share a story with one another. But sometimes, again, that was just luck because we worked at even though we weren't in the same fire department, we didn't necessarily work with other women in our organizations, but we knew.
It's an activity that has made quite a racket, literally. Perhaps you've seen it in tennis courts at your local park, or some other courts that seem built just for it. The back and forth of a ball hitting the ground, the unmistakable clash of a racket hitting the ball, the laughter of competitors playing against each other. Pickleball is a sport that has recently exploded in popularity, with associations popping up across the Lower Mainland and membership within clubs booming. Even if you don't know any club members, you may have a family member or friend who has been swept into playing casually. We wanted to hear from some members about why they joined the craze.
Tom Westendorf is the marketing and sponsorship coordinator for the club, having joined on in 2019 just before the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. He first became acquainted with the sport around 2013.
My name is Tom Westendorf, and I'm responsible for sponsorship, donations, and marketing for the club. My wife actually started first about 6 years ago, and when I first heard the name, I thought, kind of a weird name for a sport, and sort of probably made a little fun of her for the first little while until I started playing. For me, it was about 4 to 5 years ago. I mean, it's really good exercise. The good thing is that it can be played by just about anybody. So this winter, with COVID and that sort of thing, I felt that this would be a good opportunity for me to get myself engaged with the club more seriously. So I think it's still in its infancy. I think it's picking up speed, if anything. Now this might sound silly, but I would not be very surprised to see this sport be competed, at a maybe even Olympic level someday. It's a great sport. It keeps you active. You get to meet a lot of people.
Kemi Dong is a retiree and has been a part of the club since last year. However, she will enjoy her first full season of pickleball this spring, and she is very excited.
Was playing tennis, and I used to go take a lesson every day. But then it was so boring because I couldn't find any players to play. So it was really frustrating, and then I look at this pickleball. So I was kind of struggling first, and then people were so helpful. So then I just started loving it. So I do that like every day to learn something different. It's like a full-time job for me now. Yeah. I'm here to play pickleball. I told my family, if the dinner is not ready, that means you can find me in pickleball courts. I retired, so I really needed a hobby. I always like sports. I've been doing hiking and, taking tennis lessons, whatever. But the pickleball I found is I found this passion. It's because I wish I found this pickleball maybe 10 years ago.
In our meeting with Kemi, we soon discovered something incredible. She urged us to meet with someone who had become a sort of legend within the club.
If you're here, there's a 98 years old guy who's going to be here in a few minutes. And he plays pickleball, and he teaches pickleball, and he always wins the pickleball game.
No way.
He's going to be here, I told him.
Meet Stan Fryer. At 96 years old, he can still play the game, and then some.
I'm just turning 96.
Having seen so much happen to the sport over a short period of time, Stan was hopeful for what heights pickleball could reach in the coming years.
I think it'll wind up in the Olympics.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I really do.
Yeah.
It's probably the fastest growing sport, certainly in North America, than any other sport has ever grown.
Yeah.
They're putting, I think, 12 new courts in Vancouver, and courts are springing up everywhere. It's just amazing. Yeah. That's the beautiful part of this sport. People can play it right up till, I'm sure, over 100 if they wanted to.
There were points where we actually paused our interview to observe the sport.
See, they're all moving up today.
Yeah, they're moving up there in that far game. Yeah.
And you make a lot of good friends. A lot of good friends. Well, I started out playing in the church first, and we had a club there, And that was going for, well, that's been going for the 20 years in the church. The club out here didn't get started till probably 5 or 6 years later. A lot of these people I've taught, so that's how they all know me. I think I've taught at least probably 1,500 people.
Really?
Yeah, over the 20-year period, 18-year period. I think that's what some people play a game of just body. I try to play a head game.
From talking to these three players, it's clear that pickleball is more than just a sport to them. To Tom, it's part of his job to coordinate the club's development as word spreads in the community. It gets him more involved with the sport, which he enjoys. For Kimi, it's a time killer to have fun with other players competitively and casually. Her social circle revolves around the sport since discovering it. And for Stan, his passion is something that he can still partake in at his age, meaningfully with friends and family. That's a blessing you can't not appreciate.
I'm Seamus Page with my co-host and co-producer Jacob New for 1680 The Crow.
As COVID restrictions are slowly fading away, the Coquitlam Dodgeball League prepares for opening night of their 27th season, the first full season since COVID started.
When most people are looking for a recreational sports league to join, they think of hockey, basketball, or maybe soccer. However, this group of people have found their passion for dodgeball. The Coquitlam Dodgeball League, or CDL, was founded in 2007 and started with 16 teams. Now, it's made up of 40 teams with over 350 players. One player, Rob Gerard, has been playing in the CDL since it first began and is the only player to play every single year. 15 years later, he still plays, but is also the league director, which means he focuses on day-to-day tasks as well as launching every season. Rob doesn't make any money off the league. In fact, sometimes it's difficult to balance time between his job, family, and the CDL. He does this because he's passionate about the league and bringing people together.
I'm the only person that has played every season of the CDL. I've been a part of every single season, and I think I can count on one hand the amount of Wednesday nights that I've missed.
When asked how Rob got into dodgeball in his adult life, he said that it started on a whim.
And they were just three 20-something-year-old kids, and they got started on the Coquitlam Dodgeball League. And, I got a call saying, do you want to play dodgeball? And I thought that sounded like it could be something kind of fun to kill my time on a Wednesday night. I didn't realize that it was going to result in 15 years of work, but here we are.
Rob also explains the most difficult task of being the league director.
It's launching the season, no question. I'd say 90% of the work I do happens before the season starts. It's arranging gym rental contracts, ensuring that we have insurance. More recently, it's been making sure that we are in alignment with provincial health orders.
COVID added another layer of difficulty to Rob's job.
The pulse of the league wasn't a positive one at that time. People weren't too enthusiastic to expand their bubbles with people that they didn't really know very well.
We joined the CDL at Rochester Elementary in Coquitlam for their first opening night since the pandemic started. We were instantly met with warm welcomes and could feel the excitement and energy in the gym. Shortly after, league staff members jumped on stage to give everyone a reminder of the rules and regulations of the CDL.
Infraction happens at the end of the night, they will not be able to play the following week. Let's avoid that and not throw at each other's faces. Okay, cool. Let's play some dodgeball.
One of those rules and regulations is called a showdown.
Teams, there's a 10-second count. And if both players are still alive at the end of that 10-second count, we go to a showdown. And a showdown is one ball on each side of the middle, and each player gets 2. And there are no lines. There's no line boundaries. So it's just an absolute free-for-all, winner takes all. I was part of the CDL's very first showdown, and it was against a 7-year-old girl. Somebody brought their daughter to watch, and she wanted to play a game, and I couldn't bring myself to throw as hard as I could at this girl, so I was like, okay, I'll go to a showdown. And once the showdown started, the second I started walking towards her, she just dropped the balls and ran towards her mom, and I felt awful. I felt so bad. This little girl was so intimidated.
After that, the games got underway, and we were lucky enough to catch up with league founder Darren Domingo. Darren tells us what inspired him to create the CDL.
Actually, the real reason that we started the league here was because there wasn't, we couldn't play on the day that they were holding it anymore in Vancouver, so we just ended up playing on Wednesdays in Coquitlam, and we started our own thing.
This season brought one entirely new team to the league, the Crusaders. One member of the team had just moved from Ontario to British Columbia. He said that finding new friends has been his biggest challenge since the move. Hoping to change that, he joined the CDL to meet new people in his new home. The Coquitlam Dodgeball League is also an active participant in the local community. They both host and contribute to a variety of local events that benefit organizations such as Canada Cancer Society, SHARE, and the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada. They even dedicated a special tournament to honor the passing of Amanda Todd, whose brother is a part of the league. Rob explains that emotional moment.
We hosted the first annual Amanda Todd Legacy Tournament, and we raised a bunch of money. Amanda's mom was there. She said some words, and then we played the tournament, and it ended pretty poetically, actually. Amanda's brother plays in our league, and his team, although they were huge long shots, they ended up winning the entire thing.
The Coquitlam Dodgeball League looks to continue to make an impact on their community by bringing people together and hosting charity events. My name is Kyle Collis with Evan Tate, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Maybe I'll play this song.
Can you imagine having to shut up for 2 years? That's how it felt for Ty Koch, one of the emergent musicians of Vancouver. But before going too deep into the challenges he faced during COVID, let's hear about Ty and his love for music.
Music was always something I had just done, especially with singing. It was almost like subconscious. I just always did it. There wasn't ever a time where I didn't see myself singing. It was always something.
Ty Koch has been booked across Canada and Europe playing his own music or singing classical music with a core. And that's how he envisioned his musical career, never sticking with just one genre.
Yeah, they're very different. Because when I'm playing with the band, with the guys, like, I'm just having fun. Like, it's not stressful, really. And even then, it's like you're kind of just like you're showing off a little bit. Like, it's a different thing. Whereas when it comes to classical music, I feel like the music's, I mean, in comparison to music I write, I feel like it's more important. Like, and there's a lot more things to consider because the music's a lot more challenging rather than something I wrote. Because if it's my own, I can just do what I want. But following the classical music, there's very specific things that are dictated in the music that you have to follow.
But what looked to be the rising of a new promising career came to a full stop all thanks to COVID-19.
I think it's bad to try and frame it like that. Obviously, I've had those thoughts of like, oh, you know, I would have been that much more ahead, and that's something that I did struggle with at first. But like, I mean, the more you just kind of reflect on stuff like that, the worse it gets. Because if you just spend all of your time thinking, oh, I could have had this, I could have had that, and then you just don't end up doing anything, which is what happened to me for quite a little while. It was like I was just sad. I had all these opportunities and they vanished. Like I was going to do like a tour in Europe with the choir I work for, and I had all these other things planned, but that was the same situation for everyone. So you can't spend forever dwelling on what could have been.
Ty faced depression during the pandemic, and in music and friends, he found a way to cope with an uncertain future of his musical career.
I think it was literally like a coping thing. So it was like, for me, it was always like, oh, whenever I like felt upset or like angry or anything, it was like, oh, I can go play the blues music, go play on my guitar. So it was like, just to distract myself, that was what I did when I couldn't go out and see friends or like interact with anyone. I was just at home, basement, just cranking as loud as I could. Beginning of COVID, I played guitar so obsessively that I got tendinitis. So I was playing like 6 hours every day. I got way better, but now my wrist isn't quite as strong.
But for his roommate, Michael McKenzie, it just wasn't very nice to hear live music all the time.
It's nice for the most part. Occasionally it's pretty annoying when he's singing and I'm trying to nap, but other than when I'm napping, it's nice background noise, you know. He changes it up, whether it be opera or, because depending if it's his church stuff or his own music, it's either like blues, rock, or, you know, like opera, hymns.
Now that things have started to reopen, there isn't a boom like in other markets, because as Ty describes, COVID affected an industry that in Vancouver was already decaying before the pandemic.
And I think the unfortunate part with Vancouver is there isn't a lot of live venues. So now that it's finally coming back, there's other opportunities that are popping up, but it was like already kind of a dying music scene, unfortunately. People just don't really love to go to live music, which is pretty sad.
But not everything is bad. There are new opportunities and venues opening. Plus, Ty will finally be able to quit his job as a lifeguard.
I think there's some things that, like there's some, I know friends that I'm working with who are working towards opening other venues or working with other venues, because there's a format already in place in Vancouver that doesn't really work in terms of like live music. So there's people just looking at other avenues, so there's more opportunities within the city at least. And then for me, I've now taken a leave of my job as a lifeguard just because I needed a break, and I'm just going mostly all in on the music.
Like all new artists, Ty will have to regain the positioning and popularity he lost due to COVID, and to do so, Ty will be touring in Vancouver Island during the summer and will be releasing new music in late June. David Nava,
Dennis Shinolu, 1680 The Crow.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm Bonnie Chikawa with your 1 o'clock news update. Record-breaking gas prices in BC are putting food bank delivery services in risk of losing volunteers. These volunteers are responsible for bringing their own vehicle and paying for their gas. With food prices higher than ever, Ryan Bailey looks at the importance of volunteers.
The Fraser Valley Regional Food Bank's mobile meals program delivers roughly 200 hot meals each night between Monday and Thursday to seniors and at-risk people in the community. Director of Programs Lindsay Rempel says gas prices are forcing some volunteers out of action.
There have been a certain amount of volunteers that have told us that they've had to either step back completely or reduce the amount of times that they're coming to volunteer a week.
Rempel says these meals are crucial for people who are already struggling to keep up with other living expenses and often don't have caretakers. For 1680 The Crow, I'm Ryan Bailey.
Vancouver and Delta police are each investigating the death of a pedestrian in their cities. Vancouver police believe a woman was struck by a charter bus downtown, and they're asking for any witnesses to come forward. Police in Delta were previously called to an intersection where officers found a 60-year-old man who died in a hospital of serious injuries. Vancouver police say a driver who left the scene has since come forward and is cooperating with investigators. Vancouver police issue a safety warning to the public for using Facebook Marketplace after a report of series of robberies. There have been 3 robberies reported, and the latest robbery reported was in Kerrisdale, where a man pulled a gun in a coffee shop in the cellar who came to meet and buy a used watch. Police are investigating to see if this robbery cases are connected or separated. Police advise anyone meeting a stranger to buy or sell to do so outside of Vancouver Police Department headquarters downtown. Vancouver Airport Authority wants the public to know a simulated crash will take place near the airport tomorrow as part of the emergency response plan with the community. It says that the crash will happen at a contained area at an aircraft hangar in a small site near the Fraser River, along with the training activities in other buildings. Vancouver Airport says similar exercises have been done in the past as part of an ongoing effort to provide routine emergency planning. Normal operations at the airport will not be affected. Illicit drug use has been on the rise in BC, and according to BC Coroner's Service, toxic drug supply has claimed the life of 169 BC residents in August. This brings the total number of lives lost in 2022 calendar year to 1,468. The use of illicit drugs is the leading cause of unnatural death in British Columbia and the second to cancer in terms of lives lost. In the release statement of the government, BC, Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe says that the illicit drug market continues to pose immense risk to people across the province and sends condolences to families who have been affected. Since Hurricane Fiona hit the Atlantic, Defense Minister Anita Anand says about 600 military members are working in the Atlantic Canada to help the recovery efforts following post-storm. Anand was speaking at a news conference in Ottawa this morning and said the Canadian Armed Forces presence in the region is steadily increasing and continuing to operate under very challenging circumstances.
This includes reserve force personnel, including Canadian Rangers, whose own communities have been affected, standing shoulder to shoulder to help their neighbors in need.
Hurricane Ian's most damaging winds have started to batter Florida's southwest coast as the storm approaches landfall. The Category 4 hurricane is bearing down on the state with heavy rain and pushing a devastating storm surge. Diane Criswell with the Federal Emergency Management Agency says everyone must take the hurricane very seriously.
Hurricane Ian is and will continue to be a very dangerous and life-threatening storm. And this is going to be for the days ahead.
The Los Angeles police have named the suspect in the fatal shooting of rapper PNB Rock, whose real name is Rakeem Allen, and are warning the public he should be considered armed and dangerous. Allen was gunpoint down September 13th at a Southwest LA restaurant while eating with his girlfriend. Los Angeles police say a robber approached the table and demanded items from the rapper. The suspect was identified Wednesday as Freddie Lee Trone. Police released a photo of Trone but provided no additional details about him. In local weather today, it is mainly cloudy at a current 16 degrees today. There will possibly be some rainy periods into the afternoon. That was your news to 1 o'clock. My name is Bonnie Chikawa for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.